Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, May 16th. Derek Van Riper, Saris here with you on this episode. We'll dig into some fantasy baseball news you should know. We have a sticky stuff suspension that happened this week. We've got a slugger in Atlanta that's dealing with an injury, but not on the IL. So we'll talk about some implications of that. Plus, a lot of injuries hitting the Giants recently. Jung Lee with a bad one over the weekend. We're getting more details on just how bad that is. We'll talk about the fallout from that. We're also going to have Project Prospect digging into some news and notes on the prospect side, as well as some generally underwhelming performances across the landscape of pitching prospects. We'll try to talk about some names you should be interested in if you're looking for future pitching. It's not easy to find right now. And we'll have our weekend Waiver-Wire preview before we sign off for the day as well. If you haven't joined already, jump into the Discord. Lots of good times happening there. It's about as much fun as you can have in an online chat, at least, like in a baseball adjacent sort of way.
Oh yeah, definitely a lot of fun there. I love the like screaming into the void and the different channels we've got there. So
a lot of great channels. But we begin today with Ronel Blanco.
Here's somebody who wants to scream into the void right now.
Yeah, he is the player who was on the receiving end of a 10-game suspension for a sticky stuff violation that led to an ejection in his most recent outing. And I saw you tweeting about it when it happened. He wasn't gaining absurd amounts of spin, right? This is kind of a bizarro situation.
Yeah, he's a changeup guy. I mean, that doesn't mean that he couldn't use it on his breaking ball. In fact, sometimes changeup guys benefit the most by having a little sticky stuff for their breaking ball. And we've heard before from people in the game that that you can use it for one pitch. And so that's plausible, but you would normally see a 150 to 200 point rise in spin rate, I think, unless he's just been using it all the time. So I think we're just left in this weird spot where he didn't appeal it, but I don't think he did it. And I just think that he just realized there's nothing in this appeal process there's nothing I can say. There's nothing I can go to court basically and say that will be admissible or matter. I can't go there and tell them I didn't do it. That doesn't matter. It might be nice to say like, hey, could people get it mitigated down to 5 or 2 or some lower number if there's no accompanying spin rate? Because we know from the rule book, from the way umpires are paid and the way that the agreement with the umpires and baseball is that enforcement has to come from on the field. So we can't say, oh, his spin rate is up, therefore knock him. You can't do that way. But could you do it in the appeals process where the player comes and says, okay, I get it. You're going to suspend me. I got in trouble, whatever. But there's no evidence in the spin rate numbers that I was doing this. And it's because of that, I would like this reduced. Is that possible? Then it might make people like just do it their entire careers so that they have a different baseline. But at the very least, gives the player some power in the situation. As it is now, Blanco just had to be like, okay, I guess that's it.
This is, to me, the real life equivalent of getting a speeding ticket. And they have, with radar, a number. And it says, Eno was driving 77 miles per hour in a 65. And you say, yeah, I was driving 77 in a 65. And you can go to court and try to take points away and waste the time on it. But the officer, who doesn't want to be there either, will be there to say, yes, I radared Mr. Saris going 77 miles per hour in a 65 mile an hour zone.
Big difference. Here's the one difference.
What's the difference?
It's super subjective. With the radar, it's like 77 or 65. Okay. But this one, it's like, well, it was a little too sticky. Well, you come and be like, well, here it is, Judge. Can you touch it yourself? Is it too sticky? And the judge goes, I don't know. It doesn't feel that sticky. It's like, well, it's been 2 days, Judge. So maybe it's not as sticky as it was then. It was sticky then.
You're right about the subjectivity. That is a key difference. But in terms of the process, like you're just going to show up, and
there's nothing you can say.
There's no real clear defense. I may have mentioned on the podcast at one point, I got a speeding ticket when I was probably 19 years old and thought that I could go into court and argue using the cosine defense that the angle at which I was radared would have made the radar fail to work properly. And I was advised by my father, who's not a lawyer, to not do that, to just go in, apologize, get the points taken off, and then walk out of the room. That's what I was told to do. So that's what I did.
Well, not here, but it's not for here, but maybe in the Discord. If you ask me about red light camera, I'll tell you a story.
All right, there's your reason to join the Discord if you didn't have it already. As far as Blanco goes, it's kind of more of the same in terms of the overall skills that we saw during his brief time in the big leagues last year, right? I mean, the Sierra's better. The Sierra's in the low 4s instead of the high 4s. But as far as the strikeout rate, still in the 23% range. The walk rate's a shade better from 12.4% last year down to 11.1% this year. The biggest difference has been home runs are down. He's cut his home run rate by more than half. And that's a big part of how he's had so much success this year. Also, a pretty big drop in BABIP. Hit a 280 last year down to a 203 right now. So good fortune on balls in play, but mainly just getting the home run rate to not be ridiculous has been a huge part of his success to this point.
It has, but the home run rate has been ridiculous in minor league stops. It's never been really that good. And a small home run rate is the easiest way to ride noise into better results than maybe you deserve, is how I guess I'll put it. Another way of saying it is I don't really trust him going forward. The command is still not great. The package is still about the same it's ever been. I don't think there's something I can hang my hat on that he's really changed. And I expect there to be more home runs, especially as the weather improves, because I know that home runs have been down and there's some evidence that the ball is maybe a little bit deader than it's been in the past, but it also was a slightly unseasonably cold April. And so as the weather warms, I could see this being a bigger deal.
For a future episode, we're going to talk about the 2024 run environment and the ball, because yes, we must talk about the ball. That is the requirement of the job. But yeah, no appeal for Ronel Blanco. So missed a couple turns in the rotation. Astros going to a 6-man rotation temporarily and welcoming back an old friend in Jose Urquidy, perhaps by around this time next week. So good news for the Astros there. Let's talk about Austin Riley for a moment. He had an MRI earlier this week on his side. They are currently holding him out of the lineup. He's missed 3 consecutive games with what they're calling side inflammation. So on the one hand, no structural damage from the MRI. On the other hand, Riley's still not really playing this week, and he just hasn't been himself, at least up to this point in the season. Down at a 245, 319, 388 line, 3 homers through 163 plate appearances. Some of the underlying numbers are still pretty good, right? He's still hitting the ball hard. He's got an 80th percentile barrel rate. So I think the raw power is still there. But among the players in this Atlanta lineup, which is still producing at a high level as a group, who just hasn't really found that 2022 and 2023 level yet here in the first month and a half of the season.
Yeah, the thing that I would point to is probably that pull rate. It's not down a lot, career 41%, 37% right now. But what that is evidence of for me is just trying to find his contact point, trying to find his timing. And that's something that I think in the past I've sort of just rolled my eyes at when I hear it from a player, as what the reason that they're doing so well, is they're just found their timing or whatever. It's it just seems sort of like a nebulous, I don't want to answer your questions, go away kind of answer. But the more that we study this bat speed stuff and the more that we study the swing, the more that I hear between the lines when people talk about certain things in their practice and certain things in their swings that we're talking about contact point. In fact, Lars Nootbaar, when I asked him recently, okay, you trained for bat speed, you're trying to pull the ball in the air more now. What do you track? What do you think about when you're doing this? He said contact point. And I think that is really the missing part of these bat speed metrics that we've got. There's a good piece by Robert Orr up on Baseball Prospectus, so just about how if you have to normalize for contact point, because all of these metrics, I think we talked about this, all these metrics are measured at contact, and so you'll have a longer swing if you pull the ball more, you'll have more bat speed if you pull the ball more, because you're measuring it at a different point. So I would love to have contact point as a metric going forward. I just think that Riley is a guy that sometimes struggles with this. And even he told me that at the fall league once that, he kind of finds himself in between fastballs and sliders sometimes. And that's why I think he gets white hot. I think he finds that little point in space and then he just obliterates the ball for 2 months. And I don't see anything in this line right now other than the injury, which isn't maybe an injury, that suggests to me that he can't find that form and blast, 15 homers in 2 months, basically.
Yeah, this is an area where I think the rolling averages are your friends. You can look back at the slugging percentage over like a 15-game interval, go back over the last couple of seasons. These valleys are valleys we've seen before from Austin Riley. So this is not uncharted territory. As long as this injury proves to be minor, and seeing him get some time off, even without an IL stint, at least up till now, is actually encouraging. I mean, Atlanta's one of those teams. They ride the starters as aggressively as any team in the league right now. So if you have something bothering you, you need a little time off. And this may be fine by the weekend. Who knows? We'll see Austin Riley maybe in the lineup again here in the next couple of days. It's like Zach Short playing, I think, right now in his place. So not a lot of excitement in the replacement, but that's probably part of the reason why Atlanta pushes that group of starters as hard as it does. Let's talk about Jung Lee and the Giants injury situations for a moment. We did learn beyond the shoulder dislocation, there's also structural damage in the shoulder for Jung Lee. Luis Matos is up. He made a spectacular catch on Wednesday night,
and I thought he injured himself.
it looked like he injured himself 3 different ways. It looked like he may have smashed his ribs on the top of the wall making the catch,
twisted his ankle,
and his knee, and even his arm, maybe a 4th way too. The way he landed on one of his arms, all of it looked bad. And you saw the trainer out there and you thought, wow, okay, that was a spectacular catch that just cost the guy his season. Fortunately, he stayed in the game and looks like he is okay. But this is a Giants team that's had it really kind of piling on at some key spots. Patrick Bailey had to go back on the concussion IL. He came back from it and then was dealing with an illness, but then went back on the concussion IL because it's apparently related. Jorge Soler was on the field taking BP. He's on the IL right now. He fouls the ball off his own head, off the net, which is it's the Daniel Brickma from Rookie of the Year style. Everyone was putting the Daniel Stern playing Brickma, the hitting coach from that movie. Yeah. I'm glad he's okay, because you could concuss yourself that way. And then, Blake Snell's been down too. The good news of all of this is Blake Snell only has maybe one more rehab start at Sacramento before
and I guess
back.
Soler's injury, like if he's swinging again, like it wasn't that bad. There's some optimism around the team that, it's not that big a deal and he'll be back soon.
Yeah, you gave Elliot Ramos a mention, I think, last week on this Thursday episode as we were sort of looking for some deep league waiver targets. So he's playing a bit more right now as well. But Matos being back in the equation, I think we sort of landed on Matos last year when we saw him debut as maybe another Steven Kwan sort of player if it all works out, right? Matos has been very young to the level everywhere he's played. He's put up some pretty good numbers at times. I mean, last year, 32 games at AAA. Impressive slash line with a 7.2% K rate, which is just absurd. It was a 145 WRC plus with in-game power, with speed. What we've seen so far from him as a big leaguer in very limited time, 81 games now, is a 1.9% barrel rate, 31.9% hard hit rate. So maybe a little more power down the road, but limited power, I think, is fair to say for him. What kind of runway do you think he has with this Lee injury? I mean, is Matos the guy, the main guy in center field for the Giants, given that Lee is going to be down for a lengthy period of time, if he's even able to return this season at all?
Well, unfortunately, I think the buzz is that he's not a center fielder defensively, but that may not matter with this Giants team. The only other real option that would play a good center field, and I don't think it's Slater. I don't think it's Yastrzemski anymore. I don't think Wade Meckler is that great of a player. The only player that's really on the big league team that could play center field other than Matos is Tyler Fitzgerald. And I think that having Tyler Fitzgerald and Elliot Ramos in the same lineup is a little bit much for the strikeout side of the ledger. Tyler Fitzgerald is striking out 36% of the time now and is projected to strike out 30% of the time. And Ramos, for as much as that I liked some aspects of his swing in terms of speed, some power there, he's striking out 37% of the time and is projected to strike out 28% of the time. That just seems like a lot of strikeouts to have sitting next to each other in the outfield. Maybe with Matos playing elsewhere, it'll work. But it's not like Tyler Fitzgerald has played a ton of center field. He's played some infield too. He's kind of like a jack of all trades. But those are your options. And I think offensively, the guy who replaces what Lee did the closest is Matos. So I think you may just see Matos out there while Lee's gone. And what's fun about Matos compared to like a Quan type is that he hit a ball 110.8 this year in AAA and has generally had better max EV. So he has more raw power than Quan. So there is some future universe. There is in the multiverse, there is one universe where Luis Matos turns into a star. Like, I think that's possible because you've got a guy who's going to strike out like 10 or 11% of the time, who's hit the ball 111 miles an hour. Like, is there anybody else who's done that? I'm going to look real quickly over at StatCast, but
yeah, usually the K rates that are that low don't come with anything like that sort of top end power.
No, Pascantino maybe.
Yeah, maybe a little more swing and miss, but yeah, that's probably a fair.
And people are super excited about Pascantino, so I guess a younger Bogarts did stuff like this, but Bogarts have more swing and miss even. So I don't know. I think that I think that's what's going on with him. That's why Matos's numbers in AAA this year haven't been that great, and that's why I think we're gonna have like prospect fatigue with him, and people are gonna be like, oh, not this guy. If they aren't already this time, even the next time they're gonna do it. And I think there's still like a breakout opportunity here where he puts that strikeout rate together with a good pull rate, gets to that power more, puts in the ball in the air more. There's no part here where he's like, oh, but he hits the ground ball 60% of the time. No, he doesn't. He doesn't hit too many ground balls. Oh, well, he doesn't have the good raw power. Well, actually, he has okay raw power. He should be able to hit at least 15 homers, maybe 20 homers with that kind of raw power. So maybe there's one level of extra there for him defensively that keeps him on the field, and then he gets the chance to show us something. So anyway, long story short, I would say that between Ramos, Fitzgerald, and Matos is the guy with the most upside. So anybody who's just looking for a flyer should really be looking there, I think.
Yeah, and I think Giants fans should be excited about Matos. There's a lot of ways that can go right. I think he's got a contact floor like Tyler Freeman, but he doesn't hit the ball into the ground as much as Tyler Freeman did when Freeman was showing similar things at a similar age at AAA. This is kind of like a 2020 player over a partial season stretched over 2 years.
He's a little bit slower than you expect, which is why the defense is a little bit worse than you expect. But 10 stolen bases 2010 with a good batting average, like that's definitely possible.
Yeah, prospect fatigue is real. I think people had that with Luis Garcia in Washington a little bit too. Always young for level. He's finally putting it all together. I mean, geez, the barrel rate's up right now. K rate's still really good. He's always been great at limiting strikeouts, and he's running a little bit too. He's 7 for 7 as a base stealer now in 37 games this year. So it doesn't always happen immediately, but I think in Matos's case, there's enough there to like where you can probably take that flyer, at least in 15-team leagues where you've got 5 outfielders. I don't know if he's a 12-team guy right away. That probably is a little bit of a stretch, but he should be on the radar for weekend pickups. A few more weekend pickup ideas coming up here later in the show. Let's talk about the Cubs bullpen for a moment. Adbert Alzolay, Alzolay had previously lost the closer role and ends up on the IL this week with a forearm strain. So maybe that helps explain why things were just so bad for him to this point in the season. I think we dabbled in this a little bit when he lost the job. Who makes sense to take over the role? They brought in Hector Neris as a veteran this offseason. He hasn't really looked like the Hector Neris of old just yet. He looks more like old Hector Neris instead of the Hector Neris of old. And that's a bit of a problem for them. We talked about Mark Leiter Jr. as someone who's a bit interesting, but I think your solution to this problem is more fun by a pretty healthy margin.
I mean, if you just look at it this way, that and it's up on YouTube, but if you just looked at this graph that I put together that has a table that has only the healthy guys, because I thought Yency Almonte looked interesting for a while, but he's not healthy. I thought Julian Merriweather had a shot, but he's not healthy. I thought Alzolay would be okay, but he's not healthy. So I've put together a table that has healthy guys that have one hold at least this year. And I put their ERA, saves, holds, strikeout, walk, and stuff on there. And I color-coded strikeout, walk, and stuff. And there is only one player that is green across the board, and his name is Ben Brown. And I think that it's the best solution for a couple of reasons. They are playing maybe with found money. I mean, their record is good, despite what I think is a poor pen. And the other option is, of course, to like trade. So you could, I don't know, we kick this around, and listen, if you love Jordan Wicks, then you're going to hate this idea, but like maybe something like a Jordan Wicks for Michael Kopech. I know. Oh, Jordan Wicks is great. I don't think he's that great, but like maybe he turns out to be good. What fits better for this Cubs team is, we keep Ben Brown as a starter, we send Jordan Wicks, and we get Michael Kopech. We have a couple of years of him. He looks better as a reliever, and he looks like he's, he can be a closer. He would have better stuff than anybody else in our pen. We could get a closer that way. Well, the nice thing about Ben Brown is you get to keep Jordan Wicks. You get to keep maybe the option of having Ben Brown as a starter next year, because I did the math. If you have Ben Brown go on a reliever the rest of the way, he gets to about 85 innings. If he's got 85 innings this year and you transition him back to starting in the spring, I think you could still get 110, 120 maybe from him next year. And so you get to basically have your cake and eat it too, where I think Ben Brown is pretty obviously could be an amazing closer. Of course, you try to make him a starter as long as possible, but hey, your team is 25. It has 25 wins, hey, maybe this is like, we just try it. And Ben Brown would immediately be the best option for closing, I think.
Okay, so you like Ben Brown out of the longer term options, especially, and then they did add Tyson Miller. So part of what happened recently is that Richard Lovelady got DFA'd. They added Tyson Miller in a small trade from the Mariners. I think.
I left him on my thing, so he was DFA'd.
He got DFA'd, but
that makes the graph even worse.
Tyson Miller's more interesting, so that's probably the right move. Hayden Wesneski's kind of in between roles right now because of all the injuries, and I could see a world where it's maybe lighter in the short term instead of Neris, and then Ben Brown like a month from now, which is tough if you're trying to play the redraft angle, because stashing Ben Brown until he gets the opportunity, if you need the save, isn't necessarily feasible in a lot of places. It's more of a fit for longer term leagues or NL only leagues where a depth player like that can pay off more than a month down the road.
Yeah, I would just say that, maybe Stuff Plus has its flaws when it comes to starters, but it's been pretty powerful when it comes to relievers. I don't really know how Leiter is getting to these numbers with a 91 mile an hour fastball that doesn't really stand out, and one pitch that's above average by Stuff Plus, and not even great locations. So I don't really get Mark Leiter Jr. And he would immediately be the closer with the worst fastball velocity in the league. And we know that sometimes, as I know this, for example, in the 8th inning, batters swing less than they do in the 7th. I mean, in the 9th inning, batters swing less than they do in the 8th. So if you get to the 8th inning and they don't swing, and you're throwing your slop and you're trying to get strikes and you don't get them, and then you get into a count where you kind of have to throw a fastball, and they know you have to throw a fastball, and you throw a 91 mile an hour fastball. I don't know. This seems like, I hate to say he doesn't have it's not the mentality. It's more like, I don't think he has the stuff to close. I just don't think he has the stuff to close. And it may not be, and it's always worth, I think, buying, having Ben Brown on your roster for a week or two, so that you don't have to spend the $200 when Ben Brown gets anointed the closer and everyone realizes that he has the stuff to remain closer. You know what I mean? So If you can stash him ahead of time, I would do it.
I think it makes sense for them to go to Brown. I think what you see with Leiter is a splitter that's just ridiculous. That splitter's really, really good, and I think that's how he'd get away with it. I think what it would look like from a statistical profile perspective, easy for me to say, would be like late career Jose Valverde when Papa Grande would come in, like 2011 Papa Grande.
Throw splitter, surprise you with a fastball, splitter.
Yeah, right. He's not going to give up homers. He might walk a few more guys because they're going to just try to sit on it. And occasionally that's going to be the way to get a runner against him. Not going to be a crazy good strikeout rate, but sometimes guys like that keep jobs longer than we think. That would be how he'd get away with it. That'd be how he'd do it if it's going to happen for Mark Leiter Jr.
I mean, one other thing that I would say in my defense also is that like he's been pitching this well for 3 years now, or for two years in this year, and he has 7 saves. Huh?
And they still haven't done it. Yeah, they haven't given him that chance.
So they see it too, I think. You know what I mean? Like there was how many years that I want the Luke Gregerson to be closer before they, one team gave him one chance and they were like, no, that's too many sliders, dude.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, new manager is the only other thing that's different. It's not David Ross anymore. Let's move on to the Rays for a moment. Pete Fairbanks worked a scoreless 8th inning on Wednesday against the Red Sox. I think that was just leverage because of the situation. Like, look at the batters he faced. It was Devers, Tyler O'Neill, and Dominic Smith. It was Kevin Kelly getting the save, but there was Garrett Cooper, David Hamilton, and Ceddanne Rafael in the ninth. Isn't this just Kevin Cash playing the best arm he has in the highest leverage spot in the 8th inning?
Yeah, I mean the stuff is all back for Fairbanks in his last 3 outings, 130 stuff plus. Of course, Adam looks great in that way too, but I think when they're both healthy, the team has shown that they prefer Fairbanks. So I think it's all systems go for Fairbanks still.
Yeah, nothing to worry about there. Don't go pick up Kevin Kelly based on what happened on Wednesday night. Just felt that was worth a quick mention. By the way, Greg Jewett has a new reliever breakdown up on The Athletic today, so be sure to check that out. Always great stuff. Lots of good information from Greg. Let's move on to the Project Prospect section of the show. I saw Junior Caminero getting a look at second base at Durham, and it seems like he's the guy that we're now waiting on for his first 2024 opportunity. Sure, Jackson Holliday is still permanently on recall watch as well, but we keep wondering every weekend as we look at Junior Caminero stashed on some rosters, is this finally going to be the week? Is this long-term hold actually going to pay off? Do you think we're finally at that point now that we're looking at Caminero with another stretch of really good production at AAA? He's hitting .316 with a .385 OBP. He's popped 7 homers. What more do the Rays need to see, or is it more about finding the fit on the big league roster?
Yeah, I think it might be more again about pulling the plug on somebody on the big league roster. I mean, I think Jose Siri doesn't have options left. He's kind of falling out of the playing time a little bit there, but like, are you going to lose an option like that defensively in center field? And if you do, who is the backup center field? That's why we've thought it was so interesting that DeLuca has been playing center field, because the more options they have in center field, the more Jose Siri becomes, an option for DFAing. I mean, isn't that how they got him?
It was either a DFA and then a trade. Yeah, it wasn't a big transaction when they got Jose Siri.
I think it was a DFA and then a trade. And then Harold Ramirez has no options. We've talked about him ad nauseum.
Yeah.
So those are just the 2 places that if I was looking in the lineup, I would be trying to upgrade. DeLuca is already, he's played in the last week, right field, center field, DH, and left field. But every time he plays center field, I circle the lineup card a little bit. And I don't really, because I think Caballero looks fine at short. Isaac Paredes is steady producer at third. He's playing. Yandy Diaz is not going to lose his job. Randy Arozarena is not going to lose his job. So, Brandon Lau, I was a little bit worried that the injury was going to take him out further than people thought. There was some talk about, seeing a specialist, but Mark Topkin reports yesterday that he will resume swinging the bat and head out on a minor league rehab stint pretty soon. So when Brandon Lau's on that team, Rosario's a super sub. It is a little crowded right now, unless you look at Siri and Harold Ramirez's roster spots.
Yeah, and if they like those guys more than everybody else does, or want those guys on the roster, then the only other toggle is to make a trade. Right? Trade from the middle of the roster to get an upgrade. Consolidate that way. If you think the bottom of the roster is really good, you think there's still some growth potential in a guy like Siri, if you think what Ramirez brings in a part-time role, clubhouse leadership, whatever, if you value that, you got to do something else to make the pieces actually fit. I think the next few days leading into Sunday's waiver wire run will be particularly helpful, because we saw Jonathan Aranda come off the IL and play second base. He hit cleanup against the righty, which is great. He's playing second base, which is a pleasant surprise. DeLuca was the one that sat. That would have been a righty-righty matchup for him on Wednesday night. So they had Siri in center batting ninth, and then they had Richie Palacios back out there in right with Josh Lowe DHing. It's just the constant source of frustration. So if I said...
It's really weird that the 26-man roster right now has 7 outfielders on it.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Richie plays the infield too.
Yeah, he played second base on Tuesday. And Monday.
I think that's why he's fine. Like, he's staying, you know? Like, infield outfield is really valuable. Ahmed Rosario could probably play second for you. Who's the backup shortstop? Is it Ahmed Rosario?
Yeah, he's been the guy when it's not Caballero playing short. It's been Rosario.
Yikes. Anyway, that means his roster's spot safe. Josh Lowe can play center, right?
He can,
but I don't see what your trade is for in the middle of this. I don't like. Who are you suggesting? Like Yandy? They signed him, right? Like,
yeah, they extended Yandy.
You're not
like what they're getting out of
shortstop.
Paredes. I think if you were trading someone, you would trade Josh Lowe.
No.
I think and that's not even the middle of your roster. That's like upper third.
I think that roster. He is one of the few people that has like star potential.
Yeah, but then you'd get a lot more back in a trade if you traded him.
I think a DFA for Siri Ramirez is what's going to happen.
All right, you're going the DFA route. That's what I hope they do, not because I want to see people get DFA'd, but because I want to see other players play, and those guys can go play somewhere else. Hopefully they get new opportunities with another club.
There is room for another infielder. You would just play Palacios and Rosario more in the outfield if you released Ramirez or Siri.
Yeah, plenty of depth there, and Curtis Mead still doing his thing back at AAA right now, right? So lots of options in Tampa Bay. Speaking of lots of options, what's going on with the Orioles? We thought the usage of Heston Kjerstad was strange. He's finally been sent back to AAA, which if you're not going to play him, I guess that's probably the better place to put him. I don't even have a clear right answer on this one. I think at a certain point, if you think a player's got nothing left to prove, then make him a part-time guy in the big leagues and just let it be an ongoing competition. But they weren't even playing him enough for that to be an explanation of usage during his time in the big leagues. So it's Kyle Stowers back up on the roster with Kjerstad going back down. If you're in a keeper or dynasty situation, he's probably a guy you're trading for right now in anticipation of either injuries or the trade deadline shaking things up and clearing a path. You might be looking more at 2025 even if you're making a move like this. And then the bigger question, if you pull back, is Heston Kjerstad still projecting for you as enough of an impact player to justify looking at him as a long-term ad in keeper and dynasty leagues?
Well, I think that the pain point for the Orioles, I mean, I say that carefully because they are 27-14 and look like a really good team, and also just offensively. But the place where maybe the vultures are circling is one of my guys, Cedric Mullins. Mm-hmm. I do think that a 198 BABIP suggests that he's been unlucky in terms of barreling and strikeouts and walks. Like it is all a little bit worse than before, but the projections still say he's an above average bat. And and I think the eye test and the defensive numbers agree that I think he's the best option in center field. So that's why Kjerstad doesn't solve that problem. I'm unfamiliar with Stowers' abilities in center. I know that he's played 13 games in center field this year, which is more than he's played in left or right. And so I think that left or right separately, but together, it's left and right more than center, if that makes sense. So he's just played every single outfield spot. I know that they've tried Colton Cowser in center. I still think Mullins is the superior defender. So I don't really know. I don't really know what the answer is here. Austin Hayes comes back and plays one game, and his manager talks about him still feeling the calf injury. So anyway, my point is this: the outfield is in flux, and if Kjerstad can't play center, I don't think he can be part of the solution, because the real issue is who plays center field.
Yeah, with Mullins, the value's taken a bit of a hit in the last couple of weeks, even since the last rankings update. I'm with you on the low BABIP, the underlying skills, quality wise, contact quality wise, still being pretty good to where you could see some rebound. But if you look at what he's done since April 15th, 85 plate appearances, 3 homers and 4 steals, good. But a 138, 176, 263, that's a 24 WRC plus. He's fallen to the bottom third of the lineup. I mean, he hit 9th against the Blue Jays on Wednesday night. Like this is
missing
a problem.
Games. I don't know exactly what the schedule looks like, but there's too many gaps here. I don't know if they played on the 14th, but there's also between the 4th and 7th. There's 2 or 3 games missing there. So there's some games missing that bothers me as much as, and then on the 11th, just 1 plate appearance. So that suggests he was a pinch hitter. On the 2nd, he was a pinch hitter. So he needs to start getting some hits. He's feeling it right now.
You know who I've underrated on this Orioles team? Not a prospect, but a guy that they brought in last year who played really well, Ryan O'Hearn. I've completely missed on Ryan O'Hearn, and some of the limitations for how he's utilized in fantasy come from the strict platoon usage, but he has cut his strikeout rate again. Through 30 games, he's down to a 9.4% strikeout rate, a 12.3% walk rate. He's swinging at pitches outside the zone less than ever. Big change there, and still doing a lot of damage. Like this is a really interesting, like a late 20s, now early 30s player who I don't know if he'll ever get a chance to be an everyday guy for the Orioles, but he's clearly valuable to them because he's in the heart of the order when they face righties.
Yeah, interesting that he's got plus bat speed and a short swing length. Of course, he doesn't pull the ball as much as other people, so that swing length may be equal to some other power hitters. But this seems to be the best way for him to make contact, is to not focus on pulling 45% of the time and getting everything in the air, but using the whole field. That's the best way to, at least for his contact rate and for his strikeout rate, obviously. And it does seem like he has enough power to push it out to the Oppo as well. So he's a pretty good player. You can see why Kansas City might have thought that he was a slugger that couldn't hit for average. I mean, while he was there, he was hitting 220. He hit a couple under 200. And I wonder if that was kind of focusing on pulling the ball and making the most out of his power. His max EVs, for example, were higher in Kansas City than they have been in Baltimore. So he's not, reaching the same raw power levels, but it's more functional game power now.
So I think there's a lot of different player profile types that could be coached incorrectly or put into the wrong box. It's not even being coached incorrectly. It's just believing that the ceiling for a player like Ryan O'Hearn, this big lefty first baseman, is 30 plus homers, pull everything, get to that pull power. So he had people in his ear probably before he was even in pro baseball trying to get him to pull the ball for power. And someone along the way maybe realized, no, you actually have a good enough hit tool. You don't have to completely sell out and go down that path. The best version of you is a more balanced sort of approach. It's sort of like speedsters being told to hit the ball on the ground years ago, right? Hit the ball on the ground, use your legs. Like, well, that's not necessarily the best thing the speedster can do, because this person can actually hit line drives. And that's way better than hitting the ball on the ground, no matter how fast you run. So I just wonder if that's another bucket that gets less attention because of the body type and the extreme pressure we put on players like that to just hit for a massive amount of power. Otherwise, we deem them to be useless or not valuable at all. And that's kind of strange. Like, that's just another angle to think about, I guess, as you're looking for some players that could fit into your roster a bit better than their previous track records would lead you to believe.
Yeah, I also wonder if, one thing that they noticed was that his swing strike rate wasn't really commensurate with his strikeout rate, in a similar way that Mullins right now has a 10% swing strike rate and 26% strikeout rate. That is weird. But Nolan Jones has a 9.9% swing strike rate, 35.9% strikeout rate. I think that's out of whack. I think you could probably find some players like this, that where you're just like, hey, if we change the approach just a little bit, even Julian in Minnesota, it's a weird combination. Maybe he's a little bit overly patient, because he's got an 11% swing strike rate and a 33% strikeout rate.
Oh man, Jake Bauers is just leaping up the rundown already. Ever since we besmirched him and questioned the Brewers' decision to send Tyler Black down and keep Jake Bauers on the roster, he's done nothing but make us look like fools, including hitting a grand slam.
Oh my God. Lefty. And now I was looking at his overall numbers for the year, and now they look fine. And you're just like, man, sometimes a week can just do that for you.
Yeah, 123 WRC plus despite a 36.5% K rate. But I was having a conversation in our Discord with one of our listeners, and their suggestion was that because he doesn't have this overly aggressive approach on a swing level, that the K rate's probably a little bit high. And I looked at some other guys that strike out more than we'd like, that also have a similar approach. I landed on like Buxton and Kelnick as guys that I've always liked, that I wanted to get better but haven't yet, as like reasons to temper my enthusiasm about Bauers. But if you look at what Bauers has done himself in the big leagues before, if you want to say he owns those skills of putting together a season in which he had a sub 25% K rate just 3 years ago, well, that should give you more reason for optimism than anything else. I mean, there's at least something in there that says, hey, he at least understands the strike zone really well. So maybe there are some better days ahead with that K rate. Even if it's only slightly better, it might be good enough for him to keep his job, which I had previously been pretty dismissive of.
Yeah, and he's still running like he's always had a little more speed than your typical first baseman. So just an interesting package overall. And just a couple more names off this leaderboard that just popped for me. Jorge Polanco, 11% swing strike rate, 31% strikeout rate. You'd expect that to go in a different direction. And the last one, Mike Yastrzemski, 11.4 swing strike rate, 31.9 strikeout rate. And that is like way out of whack with what he's done before. The bat speed distributions show that Mike Yastrzemski only has an A swing. And so what I'm putting forth is that maybe he should have a B swing.
Yeah, that's sort of like the next part of some of the swing stuff we've talked about, saying like marrying that information with things that are currently surprising. I mean, if you watch players closely on a day-to-day basis, you might pick up on these things too. But if you don't watch the entire league frequently, we try our best to watch as much as we can. You can't pick up on approaches that easily unless you watch a team day after day after day.
Also, with Yastrzemski, like, if he's taking his A swing every time and he has 4 homers, you could watch him every day and not really know it's the A swing every time.
Right. Yeah, you're not getting it by result. But yeah, it would explain why that K rate's as high as it is with, an approach that seemingly wouldn't lead to a strikeout rate like that. That, again, is like one of the main things I thought would be interesting about that new bat tracking information we're getting from StatCast. What other project prospect topic today? Kind of a open question for you. Have you noticed that the pitching performances among many top prospects right now have been underwhelming through the first month and a half of the season. Doesn't mean these guys aren't actually good. Doesn't mean that they won't be good very soon, but you see really high walk rates. You see some bad ratios. Some of it's the weather. Some of it's guys moving up a level. Some of it's the new level having ABS and that having an impact on them. Like there's a whole bunch of different reasons for it, but I came away looking at the RotoWire top prospects list for pitchers, which has stats at every level next to it, kind of scratching my head and saying, what would I do if I were trying to find future pitching right now in this pool where you find small pitfall after small pitfall with many, many pitchers?
I mean, I think that one underlying thing, and we talked about this, on the last Rates and Barrels, is just the pitching injury has created a situation where we're just chewing through arms quicker than we can make them. That's what it seems like to me. AAA right now, the stuff plus is 86. The average stuff plus of every pitch is 86, and last year was 95. You could argue that's a calibration issue, but I don't know, because when you look at who's in AAA and who's coming up, like, it's not that exciting. We've told you the big name to circle. It's David Festa, and there's not really another one. All the people that are in the top, actually, all the people that were in that had above average stuff plus and were, in the were pitching as, I'm calling it bulk pitchers. People said that's not the right word because that makes people think of followers and stuff.
Okay, well, high volume
or starters. You can call them starters. I just hesitate to call them starters because some of them have 50 pitches per appearance. But all the people with 100 stuff plus or better are in the major leagues or hurt, other than or like not really prospects and have some weird like performance, like Dom Hamill with the Mets, I think has like a terrible walk rate, and everybody else is either up or is named Cade Horton or David Festa. And so, there's not really anything left at AAA. And in fact, it gets even worse. I took the board from Fangraphs that has the top 100 pitchers or top 100 prospects on it. And I just looked through all of the top 100 prospects on Fangraphs. And I was asking, is there somebody on this list who is A, not in the big leagues already, B, not hurt, C, like ready enough, like has been pitching at AA for some little bit, and then D, like has been pitching well? And it's amazing. There's nobody on this list. I mean, Jackson Jobe is hurt. Cade Horton, the velo's down, the locations are bad in AAA. Like, he's closest to ready. He clicks like a lot of the boxes, but not necessarily all of them. And then, Rhett Lauder is fun, but he just hit AA. I think Rhett Lauder might be one of the few names that we can bring up, but Jacob Mizorowski is like, walking 18% of the people he's seen. Tiedemann doesn't seem to even be pitching. Painter hurt, Job hurt. You go through it, and there are very few names. Noel Meyer even is striking. He's an A ball, and he's striking out 18% of the people we saw. So I think there's two names other than David Festa that jump off this list, and we're not even sure they're totally ready. So Noah Schultz.
Yeah. Noah Schultz is more of a long-term. If you are playing for the future and he happens to be available in your league, you might say, hey, he could jump over a lot of the guys that are struggling at the levels above him because he has excellent stuff. He just hasn't had a chance to prove it over a high volume of innings yet. So that's sort of the what could go right name that you're looking at. He's likely more than a year away because the White Sox in their rebuild aren't going to rush him up to the big leagues and say, just go out there and pitch every day. But ceiling is about as high as anyone you're going to find on most pitching prospect lists.
Yeah, and like for people a little bit more sort of win nowy, I think Max Meyer's just working on stuff in the minors. I think he'll be back. He's still a good name. And then the only other name in the top 100 that really sticks out for me is Tink Hence. We're talking about a guy that the only real negative thing that you can find on descriptions of him are that he's small and 6'1", 195 is not, when on the paper does not read that small. But I was looking at Gavin Stone at the park the other day and thought, man, this guy looks small. And Gavin Stone is listed at 6'1", 175. And Dean Kramer is listed at, I think, 6'2", 200. And I was looking at him and thinking he just looks small. So I wonder if just our frame of reference is a little bit off, that these guys are just looking bigger and bigger. We used to make a big deal if someone wasn't 6 foot. Are we going to make a big deal when they're not 6'2" now? And so Tink Hence, the production seems there. He's in AA for a second time, 15% swing strike rate, 27% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. He's on a team that needs him, the Cardinals. He would be a win for organization for Mozeliak that's kind of under fire right now. It seems like Tink Hence could be someone you could stash. And then I also spotted Adam Mazur. I was on the radio in San Diego this morning, and we were talking about how it hasn't quite worked out the way we thought at the back end of the rotation with Vasquez and Brito. Adam Mazur was just sent to AAA, where he has a 24% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. Before in AA, he had a 27% strikeout rate, 4% walk rate. Seems like he has pretty good command. He's a little bit of an unknown right now, and maybe he doesn't have the pathway if they're just going to continue with Vasquez. But he fits a lot of the box. He's not in the top 100, so he doesn't click that box, but he is ready, pitching well, and close to the big leagues. So
yeah, it's not great out there. There's a few names kind of caught in between. You might be wondering what's going on with those Atlanta pitching prospects. We saw AJ Smith-Shawver in the big leagues last year. He's having a pretty uneven season at AAA right now, still very young for the level. So this is not the referendum on what his long-term outlook is going to look like. It's just more of he's maybe not quite as ready as we thought when they pushed him last year. So it's going to take some more time for him. Heston Waldrop is pitching better at AA than he was after a really rough start to begin the year. 8 innings last time out with 8 strikeouts too. So, hey, who says pitching prospects don't pitch deep into games anymore? You got 8 innings of Heston Waldrop this week.
Yeah, Waldrop is should be on our list. Pitching well, close. I don't know, what's the corresponding move right now, because Reynaldo Lopez looks great. I guess Bryce Elder's spot is always in question. But he's credible. It isn't. Would you rather have Bryce Elder or Randy Vasquez if you're a big league team?
Probably Vasquez, but is Vasquez's best pitch? Changeup probably is his best pitch, right?
Yeah.
Is that the best pitch that either one of them has? Maybe the guy that has the best
Elder's
pitch.
command is much better than Vasquez's, so.
Yeah. Huh. That's a good would you rather.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then, I think Waldrop's a better prospect than Mazur. So yeah. If you wanted to put him on the list ahead of Mazur, Festa has more opportunity than any of them if you don't like Simeon Woods Richardson.
See, Woods Richardson and Elder and some of these guys, I mean, Woods Richardson at least was one time a more highly regarded prospect than Bryce Elder ever was. Some of these guys that get to the big leagues and just have success despite the fact that they have maybe slightly below average big league stuff get put into this bucket where we're always trying to take their job away. But if they're getting results, even if it takes a half season, we saw it with Bryce Elder last year, it might take 15 starts before the league figures it out. And then maybe you get to late July, August, then they're making a change. Then the Twins are looking at David Festa as better than Woods Richardson. But it's hard to look at a guy that goes through 5 starts, has a 23-6 K to VB, keeps the ball in the yard and say, yeah, we want to make a change. Right. So you got to wait it out.
So there is not on this list, especially not in 12 teams, but even in 15 teams, is there a name on here that you would stash in 15 teams that we've mentioned? I don't think so.
I don't think there is right now. I think the bigger pitching stashes right now seem to be more from the rehabbing group. Like instead of prospects, it's looking kind of at some of the waiver wire stuff for this weekend. You're not stashing Jeffrey Springs yet, but you're certainly thinking about the day, probably a month or so from now, which will be about maybe 2 weeks before his return, where you would maybe think about adding him.
And if you're in first place, maybe you want to be a week ahead of other people.
Right, because I assume in most leagues, Garrett Cole was either held the entire time for the injury, or you got IL spots. Like he's also increasing activity in bullpen sessions. With Springs pitching in a complex league game after the weekend, so he's probably about a month or so.
But even the Lodolo injury supposedly might be short. So if somebody drops him, you could try to hop on that really quickly.
Yeah, and I was looking at some players available in my 12-team leagues. Garrett Whitlock had a great rehab start on Wednesday. There's a chance he was dropped in some more shallow leagues. Like it's more guys like that I'm trying to snap up when I can, as opposed to prospects right now, which is a little bit different. Usually we have, at least in a lot of past years, you'd have some pitching prospects you're sure were just around the corner. And I think we get this combination of a lot of recent promotions this year plus last year, injuries, just maybe a post 2020 gap in terms of some talent as well. Like maybe the impact of that is being felt in some long-term leagues still, because a lot of guys that would be in the minor leagues right now at age 21 would have been 17 when 2020 got nixed. So just some maybe like big development hiccups as a result of that lost season are also playing out right now.
Yeah. I guess you could, if you were really leading the pack and you thought you had an extra spot, you could kind of go against the grain a little bit with Horton and Job. And
I think Job's got a hamstring injury, so that's a pretty minor injury. He's at double
stash
A.
one of the top guys and just be like, I have one of the top guys. They'll make room for him. Like sometimes when you're a top guy, it doesn't matter what's going on in the rotation. They're just like, Ben Brown to the bullpen and Cade Horton up,
I think Cade Horton, it's more of a let's just watch and see what the velocity does. Being down for one start doesn't really mean a lot. If it's down for 3 or 4 starts, then maybe you tick the ceiling down a little, but he still could be their 3rd or 4th best starter. That's well within range for Cade Horton. So I think of the prospects we mentioned, he'd be the one that I still think is closest, despite a little bump in the road here early on at AAA.
Yeah, it is an interesting year just in general, where I don't think we'll want to. I don't think we'll want to we just put forth all the reasons why maybe not to stash Caminero, right?
Yes, I think we did.
And there's not like even a hitting prospect that I would necessarily stash right now. So it's just it's a weird part in the year where I'm not. It's not obvious to me what the stashes are. I think you might want to look at major leaguers that could just create more playing time for themselves. On the rundown, we've got Dominic Canzone. If you have daily lineups, or you just want to have an extra guy on your list that you could move in when he sees a bunch of righties, or there's sometimes we on most of my leagues I have a guy who's a left-hander that is only a platoon, but I can spot points in the schedule where I'm like, 3 right-handers in a row, he's in my lineup. That's for streaming as well. Is Canzone should be someone you think about. Jonathan Aranda, in terms of guys that are in between what you would want to start and streaming, somebody that you could have on your bench, sometimes has a middle infield eligibility. So those are the types of players. They're kind of young players that are in the big leagues that could play themselves into full-time playing time as well.
Yeah. I think those two coming off the IL recently are still pretty widely available. A lot of uncertainty about role for both, but Aranda, as we've said time and time again, nothing left to prove against AAA pitching. At some point, You need to see what he does against regular opportunities in the big leagues and see if he's good enough to be a part of your core or not. And based on where they're hitting him coming off the IL, I think they at least want to explore that for a brief time. I would say you could make a similar case for Joey Ortiz as another guy who's been in the big leagues. The Brewers have been shuffling things around their roster. I think Oliver Dunn just got optioned down. He seems to be kind of
solid at third, right?
Really nice defender, kind of good defender at like 3 spots and gives them cover along with Bryce Terang. He's playing like 80% of the time right now. He's played 8 of the last 10 or started 8 of the last 10. And I think the way things are happening with that team, he could inch that up even further. But the bat's slowly waking up. Joey Ortiz wasn't hitting a lot to begin the season, and I think that's always tough when you're not playing every day. But now he's already pushed that line up to 277, 384, 511.
Yeah.
Not chasing, drawing walks. I mean, that's
4 homers, I think.
That's a pretty good looking combination of skills in a limited sample right now.
I was looking at him in my 12-teamer. I think, in 12-teamers, he's the kind of guy who's on your wire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's actually worth picking up because he'll have multi-eligibility. What he does really well is if you're in head-to-head in a 12-teamer, he's a guy that you would love to have to sort of plug in to get extra plate appearances when someone's not playing, or just you have to use as like your 1 or 2 bench bats.
I trust the way that Joey Ortiz gets there. I trust him a lot more than Jake Bauers as far as like which semi-regular or near everyday guy for the Brewers is going to be better in the long run. A lot more trust in Ortiz, a little bit younger, just a much
more
better plate
defensive
approach.
Value.
Yeah, and Bauers has defensive value, but he has it at positions where you don't worry as much about it. It's nice to have it, but eventually if the bat's not what you want, you move on. A couple of catchers actually that were kind of interesting to me. Connor Wong, still kind of sitting below 50% rostered in CBS leagues. I almost wonder if he's pushing his way into some 1-catcher leagues because of how well he's played for the Red Sox. And if you're looking in the 2-catcher bucket, maybe Corey Lee. I wish they'd play him more. He's still sharing a lot of time with Martin Maldonado. But I looked at Lee last week as sort of a backup if you were chasing Ivan Herrera or just trying to find a catcher. I ended up getting him in one league. He's got a pretty high BABIP, like close to 400 right now. That's been propping him up. But he's got a career 8.7% barrel rate. And you can look back at his old Fangraphs graduation. His too long didn't read. Lee has a 70 arm and plus power, likely a 30 grade hitter, maybe still enough to catch every day. I think that's exactly what he is. And like, how long are you really going to play Martin Maldonado if you're the White Sox? It's nice to have him as a backup, but just see what Lee does with the added playing time.
And you could even do a 2 young catcher tandem there with Caro.
Yeah, eventually you could do that, and that would be just fine. So Corey Lee had a 25 homer, 12 steal season at AAA as a 23-year-old back in 2022 in Houston. Like, this guy deserves an opportunity on a team that's rebuilding the way the White Sox are. So those were a couple catchers that sort of caught my eye, just digging around looking for any bit of hope in that corner of the player pool. Pitching.
Yeah. If you're looking for pitching, the name that stuck out from the names you put on the list, obviously Gasser is interesting for the start. Miami, we've talked about him a little bit. And then the other name that really stuck out was Jose Soriano.
Yeah, he's still under rostered in just about every format. I mean, we talked about him at first when he got the opportunity to start as a 2 Tommy John guy, where you're worried about him physically not holding up, but his stuff is really good for a widely available pitcher.
He's sitting 99 basically. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have good command, and he doesn't. I mean, the big problem is if a lot of times when you're streaming, you're chasing wins, and he has 5.1, 5 1/3, 4 2/3, 6, 1 2/3, 6, 5. Like it's going to be barely there. Like if he gets you a win, you're kind of hoping that the Angels score some runs in the first 5 innings, which is actually also a part of why it's difficult for him to get wins. But just in terms of the quality of pitchers around him, I'd go Gasser Soriano. And then Gasser, he might be a little bit more schedule dependent than people realize. I mean, I like his stuff. He throws a lot of changeups. He only got 2 strikeouts in the last start. It's his best fastball is a sinker. I like him, but I don't really know how he got to 30% strikeout rate in the minors.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens as he gets tested more. I mean, he's faced 2 below average lineups on the season to this point. Debuted against the Cardinals. They're a 90 WRC plus so far. Just faced the Pirates, 24.4% K rate as a team, 86 WRC plus. He didn't carve them up, even though he was good against them. And Miami, second worst lineup in the league by WRC plus, is his next start. So at least it's been a very soft landing spot for him to begin the year. But he's actually still among the more interesting pitchers out there just because it's so thin in so many places. I think Alec Mills is interesting, man. I forget if we talked about him at the very beginning of the season before his IL stint or if I just sent you a text, and it seemed like he made a slight adjustment to his pitch mix, and it's been paying off so far. We're not looking at a guy that's going to be like good in the sense of being 10 and 12 team league, every start viable, but his division helps being in the AL Central. Like, yeah, we like that group of teams better than we have in past years. It's still an easier place to pitch than most other divisions, so that's a plus. I think there's actually more to come strikeout rate wise. Like, he could be more of like a 7.5 Ks per 9, 20% strikeout rate guy, as opposed to like the high teens we've seen to this point. So I'm a little bit interested.
Alec Marsh.
Or Alec Marsh. Yeah, I don't want Alec Mills. I want Alec Marsh.
Man, I was just having a heart attack because I'm looking at Alec Mills' page and I'm like,
he's gone. He's retired. No, Alec Marsh.
Yikes. Marsh, yeah, you're right about the pitch mix change, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a minor one. He's tripled the usage of his slider. No, that was Alec Mills. What has he changed? Oh, more sinkers. Stuff Plus says that Marsh's best pitch is best fastball is a sinker. So he's throwing more sinkers against righties, and that's working for him. The one nice thing about Marsh is that he's in that. I needed to have a name for this. Like pitcher list. I'm jealous of him. He always has like these names like Toby and all this stuff. Like there has to be a word for like the kitchen sink guy that in any given year could totally be fine. It's kind of the reason why I was bullish on Dean Kramer this year. It's the guy who has a bunch of pitches, who looks like he has okay command and could maybe figure it out and have a good year. That doesn't roll off your tongue.
Kitchen sink guy, a plumber.
Yeah, kitchen sink. Plumber.
Hey, he's a plumber.
All right. Alec Marsh is the plumber. I like it.
You need plumbers. You need plumbers in this world.
You need plumbers.
Highly respected.
Especially you got kids like mine. I don't know what it is. They stop up toilets everywhere. I mean, they stopped up the Little League toilet. They stopped up the toilet. They stopped up the toilet at my family member's house. I'm like, what are you guys doing?
I had a friend throw an apple core into my toilet in college, and it was just, I walked in there and it was just floating in there. I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "It'll go down." I said, "Look at the pipe connected to this toilet. Tell me how that's going to fit through." Like, you got to fish that out of there, bud. You can't just throw apple cores down the toilet.
Well, good thing you got Alec Marsh for you. Another nice thing about it is that the schedule will favor him. There will be, I think he's the kind of guy you can keep on your team. There'll be some weeks you don't want to start him. And there'll be
that's going to happen.
A lot of weeks where you're happy to start him.
In a pitching world where you're not stashing prospects and you just need to survive and find quality ratios, I actually think Alec Marsh can deliver on that. I think that's something he's capable of doing.
A little bit load him because it's below average Stuff Plus, below average strikeout rate. There's, Sierra's 4.01. But you know what? A 4.01 Sierra is actually better than league average.
Right. And I think it's also a team that we think is on the rise too. So your win probability is up a little bit relative to normal as well. Because he's efficient, he can get to the fifth enough times to actually be win eligible on a pretty regular basis. So yeah, it's probably a 3.75 ERA and a 1.18, 1.20 whip here on out. If things are going well, that's good. That's better than what you're going to find from a lot of pitchers out there. So that's
you may beat people to him on the wire if they're using projections only, because the bat has a 5.33 for him.
Yeah, projections don't like him. So there's definitely a load of quality with Alec Marsh. I mean, I can't believe I called him Alec Mills, because I did the same thing. I pulled up the page. I'm like, what happened? Wait, did he get cut? Why would they cut him? He's good. It's like, oh no, just
He's throwing a slider
pre-coffee.
30% of the time. Oh, that's
Yeah.
the wrong page.
Yeah, pre-coffee addition to the rundown. But that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. On our way out the door, a couple reminders. Get a subscription at athletic.com/Rates and Barrels. Find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. Find the podcast at Rates and Barrels. We are back with you at 1 o'clock Eastern on our YouTube page on Friday.
Thanks for listening.